When you combine the Victorian era, steam-powered machines, and an alternate history, you get steampunk. And that is the topic of the day. Hi, I'm Justine and this is Bookends. Today I'm going to chat with Adrienne Kress, who's just come out with her first young adult novel, and it's steampunk. It's called The Friday Society, about 3 kick-ass female assistants. And we're at Bakka Phoenix Books to get a few other recommendations. Let's go on in. I've got Adrienne Kress with me, author of The Friday Society. Hi, Adrienne.
Hi.
Okay, so first of all, did you always plan to be a writer? Because you started off in acting.
Yes. Well, professionally, I started off with acting, but I've been writing and acting my whole life since I was very, very little. I actually never planned on being a writer. I assumed everybody did writing as a hobby when they got home from school and they were feeling a little sad or their summer job made them feel really, really awful. They would come home and write amazing stories that would take them into different worlds and make them very happy. I just assumed basically everybody did that.
Now, your parents are or were English teachers.
Yes.
Did that influence you at all in writing when you were younger?
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad would put words, so I would learn how to read, sort of, and more complicated words. He would put every morning as a teeny tiny small child, me, not him, on the fridge, and I would come down every morning and I'd have to sound it out and figure out what the word was, and then I'd learn it. And then once we collected a whole bunch of words, I would write a story using all the words, which means I would dictate and my dad would type it up on his Commodore 64 and add a couple little icons that were available with the Commodore 64. Yeah. Some little clip art things, I guess. And so, yeah, so of course, yes, a little bit of encouragement.
What is steampunk all about, and what attracts you to steampunk?
Oh, big question. Steampunk is all about a lot of stuff. It's a lot of disparate elements coming together to form awesome. If I say this, I'll get in trouble, but I'm still going to say this. Victorian science fiction is the easiest way to describe it, but then people within the steampunk community will be like, no, it's so much more, and I agree. You can have post-apocalyptic steampunk, you can have steampunk set in other locations, other times. But the basic premise is that it's contemporary writers, so writers writing now. It started initially in the 70s as a writing movement, sort of a jokey movement, but it actually became something more. Contemporary writers writing about the past and creating a past that uses futuristic technology, using the technology of the past. So going to the moon, let's say, but using a steam-powered spaceship with that doors open with using clockwork gears and pieces as they open, and it could never have been. So there is this techno fantasy element to it, but it's a lot of fun. I also think because in order to appreciate steampunk, you have to enjoy the past, you have to enjoy science fiction, you have to enjoy absurd things and appreciate that this is still totally awesome, although totally impossible. So I think you get some really interesting people who are drawn to it, who have lots of different parts of themselves that combine.
Now, when you're writing for teens,
yes,
this book is ages 12 and up.
Yeah.
How do you know what you can say or what to censor? How do you make that decision?
That's sort of actually more of a question for the other 2 books, which are younger, 8 to 12, that I've written. Which one?
They're right here. Yep.
Because when it comes to teens, you actually can write about anything, and you can have bad language, you can write about sex, violence, and rock and or roll. You can do it all. I think that the key with writing young adult isn't so much about the content, but about the structuring of the story, the storytelling itself. There's usually a greater sense of forward momentum. Not as much sitting back and thinking about things, though there's a great deal of angst. One doesn't sort of wallow in it nearly as much as maybe an older audience book would. It's also teenage protagonists, that's a must. It's one of those lovely few rules that are in young adult teen protagonists.
Yeah.
And even that can be broken a little bit because you have, the beginning of university where technically you are a teen, but you're not, going through the teen experience. It's also, I like to call it a genre, or maybe more of a market, not so much genre, of firsts. So that it might not necessarily be a first kiss if your characters are 16, 17, 18, but maybe the first time you have sex, or the first time you've had sex with somebody you actually care about, or the first time you've realized maybe you disagree with your parents, or you want to be rebellious, or maybe you've been rebellious the whole time and it's the first time realizing maybe I don't know everything. It's that sort of, that teen experience of having it for the first time, whatever that first is. And I think for all those reasons, that's why it's incredibly popular with adult readers. I think the immediacy of the storytelling and the forward-moving plots, I think adults want to read that too.
Your first book is also based on a strong female protagonist.
Yes.
Why do you go for that kind of a character?
Well, I think I go for that kind of a character because I am that kind of a character. I think ultimately when one sort of starts writing, you sort of write yourself into most of what you're doing. In the fan fiction community, they call that a Mary Sue. But as you grow as a writer, you'll find other characters that really fascinate you. But I have to say that if I'm going to write a female character, I'm going to write her as strong because that's just a given. It's not sort of a particular type in my mind. It's what female characters are, even and especially if they have flaws and weaknesses. I think it's important also, though, with strong female characters that they don't become types. They don't become undefeatable. They have flaws. They have weaknesses. They are human beings, because I think what's happening now is we're having another type, like the damsel in distress, that people are just plunking into stories and going, okay, there, I've handled the female character. And no, we're not a type. We're not, one of a many thing. It's like if you watch any heist movie, you'll have the hot guy, the geeky guy, the one person of color, because that's also a type, I don't know, the comic guy. You'll have all these different guys and the woman.
Yeah.
And we're not the woman, we are a person, and there are types of us as well. And so I think we do run a risk with creating strong female characters that they become the basically polar opposite of the damsel in distress, but giving us the exact same thing. So you still want to create three-dimensional characters. Ultimately, it's not about a strong female character, it's about a strong character.
Adrienne, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I've got Chris Szego right now, manager of Bakka Phoenix Books. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how you doing?
So you have some other recommendations here.
Yes, it's another interesting thing about steampunk.
Are these all steampunk young adults?
No, they're not.
Steampunk mix.
Steampunk mix. Steampunk is not necessarily aimed at young adult. Partially, I think, because of the historical detail. Right, you need a little bit of time to amass some of that historical knowledge, and the people who make the costumes, for all that they are imagining a level of technology that didn't exist, they are trying to be as true as possible to the look and the interaction of the machinery and things like that, as could possibly have existed at that time. This one it's the third in a collection of anthologies in which and I like the anthologies because you'll get a lot of different authors' takes on steampunk. So not only do you get different views of the technology, you get different kinds of characters, different kinds of stories. So it's a really great way to immerse yourself in the world.
And it's just called Steampunk.
Yes, this one is 3. So obviously there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. This is another one, different publisher. So there are, again, different authors, not necessarily the same ones in the first.
And it's called The Mammoth Book of Steampunk.
Steampunk, yes.
So it's more stories.
Yes.
30 extraordinary tales.
Yes, exactly. I've also enjoyed these. The Parasol Protectorate series by Gail Carriger. There are 5, 6 books in the series. I've just pulled the first one is Soulless. They were a lot of fun. They read, they're sort of read like an Edwardian hotel farce / spy novel / steampunk.
I love it already.
Yes, I mean they are Victorian.
Yeah.
Queen Victoria is in it, so it's not really Edwardian. It's really Victorian. But they were a lot of fun, and that sort of spy-esque story was primary. There is steampunk in terms of the outfits, in terms of the clockwork, in terms of the parasols, But that is not what it is about. But the only story I've ever truly loved in the steampunk genre, and it's not in the steampunk genre, it just borrows from some of the traditions, was The Friday Society by Adrienne Kress. I adored it. I thought it was fabulous. I thought the steampunk elements were beautifully used, but that's not what it was about. And I thought that, and as somebody who reads an enormous amount of, SF and young adult fiction, just in general, I thought she did some things in there that are not often seen these days in terms of young adult. She's got the characters having real relationships with one another, that friendship can be complicated. You can like someone and not understand them. You can like someone and dislike them at the same time, and know enough about the other person to know that that dislike is momentary and will go away. It was wonderful.
Chris, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so you can find more information about Adrienne's book, as well as these others that Chris has mentioned, on our website, bookendstv.com.